I forgot it, so doesn't matter. Maybe you. Municipal Services Joint Powers Authority will please come to order. This is for the date of Tuesday, February 18th, 2014. Will you please call the roll?
Board Member Atkinson?
Present.
Board Member Barnes?
Present.
Board Member Moss?
Here.
Vice Chair Weil?
Here.
And Chair Thompson.
Here. Next item, please.
Consent calendar. Consent calendar item are considered to be routine by the board and will be enacted by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, the staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the board. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a board member or a member of the audience requests removal of the items from the consent calendar.
Is there any item a member of the board would like to have removed? Is there any item a member of the public would like to have removed? Seeing no one, we'll bring it back to the board, and the chair will entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
I'll second
It has
that.
been moved by Board Member Barnes and seconded by Board Member Atkinson that we approve the consent calendar. Would you please poll the board?
Board Member Atkinson?
Aye.
Board Member Barnes?
Aye.
Board Member Moss?
Aye.
Vice Chair Weil?
Yes.
Chair Thompson.
Aye, the motion carries. Next item is adjournment. The meeting is adjourned. Doing everything tonight. Thank you. The meeting of the Albany City Council will come to order. This is for Tuesday, February 18th, 2014. Pledge of Allegiance. Would you please join Councilmember Atkinson in the Pledge of Allegiance? Roll call.
Councilmember Atkinson?
Present.
Councilmember Barnes?
Present.
Councilmember Moss?
Here.
Vice Mayor Weil?
Here.
Mayor Thompson.
Here. Next item, please.
Consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, the staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the City Council. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or a member of the audience requests removal of the items from the consent calendar.
Is there any item a member of the council would like to have, or the staff would like to have removed? I just want to make a clarification because I believe there was a discrepancy between the written copy and the online version. Let's see if I can find the page. Page 7 of the city policies. This should read, Albany advisory body takes action to approve item for city council, including options for the council and pro-con analysis, And that should be the end of the statement. Hey, is there any item a member of the public would like to have removed? Seeing none, bring it back to council, and the chair will entertain a motion.
Well, so moved. I move adoption of the consent calendar.
I second it.
It has been moved by Councilmember Moss and seconded by Vice Mayor Weil that we approve the consent calendar. Would you please poll the council?
Councilmember Atkinson?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Councilmember Moss?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Weil?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Aye, and the motion carries.
And
Next
I'm
item, please.
I'm sorry, I skipped report on action taken in closed session.
We skipped number 3.
What did I skip?
The action taken in the closed session.
Oh, thank you. I pulled that too. Where did I put it? Okay. The council met in closed session for the purpose of labor negotiations pursuant to Government Code Section 59457.6 with SEIU and AFFA. On SEIU, no action was taken. With AFFA, council gave direction to the consultant and staff. And for the purpose of conference with legal counsel to discuss existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D1, Albany Housing Advocates Amber Whitson, Betty Stevenson versus the City of Albany, Albany County Superior Court Case RG 13-697761, and we gave council direction. Next item, please.
Presentation, review of advisory body work plans. Staff recommendation that the council receive presentations regarding the 2014 work plans developed by the Arts Committee, Sustainability Committee, and the Social and Economic Justice Commission, outlining the priority tasks for each respective group, and provide any comments or direction regarding each advisory body work plan.
Staff, please.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. As you recall, at your last meeting, you received work plan presentations by 3 of the council's advisory bodies. Tonight, you will receive 3 more presentations from a subset of our advisory bodies, including the Arts Committee, Social and Economic Justice Commission, and Sustainability Committee. I'd like to reiterate that as part of the biannual review of the advisory bodies, this is an opportunity to give feedback and direction regarding the work plans and also receive a presentation on achievements to date of each of the respective advisory bodies. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Peter Goodman, Chair for the Arts Commission.
Thank you. You have before you our 2014 work plan. Do you want me to take everything in order, or do you just want to look at it and ask me questions about things that are of particular interest? Take them in order? Okay. Well, we've kind of broken it out into different sequences, starting with the community center foyer. This is the foyer by the library. We have 4 artists a year. We've got a show going on. We've selected the artists that are going to be here for this year already. And I think next month or month after, we'll be looking at submissions for the foyer. But that is an ongoing project, and I think it contributes a lot to the community. Certainly very visible art. Our Poet Laureate program has, I guess for lack of a better word, it's somewhat stalled in that we've had 2 Poets Laureate now, and the second, Toby Bielowski's term has ended. And since last spring, we've actually been putting out a call for someone to apply for a new poet, and we have not actually received any applications, and we've had several discussions on the committee as to what we can do to remedy that, whether the problem is our terms are too stringent for the applicants, or do we have to have more publicity? So I don't know. Currently, we do not have a poet laureate in the city, but we are in the process of gathering up all the previous poets' work and putting them up on our city website. Well, the public art program, that's just kind of a catch-all. It's really a reference to what we're going to do with the funds that are in the public art fund currently collected as a result of projects that are happening around the city. Currently, the art fund has over $62,000 in it. And we have had discussion as to whether or not there is something we want to do with that money now, or whether we want to wait to see if we could do something more substantial. Odd as it may sound, $62,000 doesn't really buy a very great amount of art, if you're looking for quality public art. So our current thinking is that we're going to sit on it and wait until a really good opportunity comes along. We are anticipating, of course, with some of the development in town, Safeway, UC Village, that fund would increase substantially. So probably not this year, but next year when we have funds, I would expect that there'd be a lot more happening in actual public art projects underway. A mural program, we are basically trying to encourage merchants and residents around town with visible walls to get together with an artist and create murals on those walls to entertain and decorate the citizens and the city. The Arts Committee is not in a position to actually create the murals themselves, but we view ourselves as people who can put an artist and a building owner together and suggest ways that they could work together. And we have a brochure that we're currently it's about done, we're about ready to launch. And we've been assembling information for building owners, particularly on materials that they can use, as well as insurance problems that they might run into. So then the two at the bottom, the Arts and Green Festival and Film Festival, you may recall that in previous years, the Arts Festival was very involved in the Arts and Green Festival. We withdrew because we had a problem for a while with the arts component not really being as successful as we or the artists wanted it to be, so we kind of took a break. But we've been asked to re-participate, so this year we are more engaged in the Film Festival and the Arts and Green Festival, although we're really acting more as helpers as opposed to being involved in the logistics and planning. Next year, I suspect we're going to be much more involved in both of those programs. And then down on the planning side, those things under planning, they're not actual things that are underway, but we're aware that these are opportunities that are going to present themselves to us very soon. So we have been getting information from various people who are involved in those projects, letting us know what's coming up and giving us a rough sense of timetable so that we can be sure that we work with the council and with the planning department to work on the arts component of those. Policy development. Well, the Art in Public Places Ordinance procedures, that is up there because it's something we'd like to revisit on a regular basis to make sure that the things we're doing are in line with the city's master plan for art, and also to see if there are any things happening in town or in the world at large that might suggest that we revise or suggest revisions to the city's master plan. So those are just like planning documents that we refer to on a regular basis. Street painting is it's another plan that was brought to us, but currently I actually don't know where that is being developed. That was brought to us from an agency outside the Arts Committee. And under the bottom there, topics to continually evaluate. Well, under maintenance of public art, we did manage to have the herons down by the bulb. They were restored. They had a lot of graffiti, rot, rust. All that was cleaned off. And we realize that those birds will probably not be there forever, but I think we've got some additional years out of them at least. For new development projects, we just like to stay in the loop and find out what might be coming up, what projects are being proposed to the city. It gives us some sense of what the budget might be and helps us in our planning, long-term scheduling as to how much money might be available for public art. Under the local artist listing, that's a new addition that Jules Coblin on the committee is mostly in charge of. It's basically assembling a local artist database so that anyone in the city who is in need of an artist for whatever reason, or an artist who is in need of a customer, would be able to say, hi, I'm available. It just is an indication of how the arts are thriving in Albany and how there are many artists here. And, well, let's see. Well, promotion of Albany Arts Committee, that's, we would just want to try and stay in front of the community, is letting them know that there's a lot of art, there's a lot of things happening, and to make the citizens aware that there is an arts committee. It'd be nice to have more people come to our meetings, of course, but it'd be especially nice for artists and other people in town who feel the need to create art or to see art to come to us and say, hey, there's a need here. Is there any way that you could address it? And we'd like to make sure that the citizens of Albany know that we're available for that. And finally, I'd just like to draw your attention to the fact that the website for the Arts Committee that's on the city website has been beefed up. So all of our projects are there. You can look and see the public art that exists. There are photographs there, descriptions of it, plus descriptions of the Poet Laureate project, for example, the local artist listing, and other things that we're engaged with. So it's, again, that sort of fits in with the idea that we're trying to be more public and visible in the city. Well, that's as much as I have to say. If you have any questions about any of these points, sure.
So on the foyer, do you have trouble finding people that would like to display their art, or is there sort of a waiting list?
There's not a waiting list, because we basically get all the submissions in a year and look them over, and then pick the ones we want and say sorry to the ones that we don't, and encourage them to resubmit if they'd like. We get, I think we had maybe 13 or 14 people submitting for 4 spots. So generally, I think we have enough, and we've been very happy with the quality that we've gotten to.
Are these Albany artists, or can they be from other cities?
They're local. They're not necessarily in Albany. We really would favor Albany artists, but they come from our local region,
Okay,
not
great.
too far afield.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Other questions?
Yeah, one little one here. The mural project, have you found potential sites or?
Yes, actually, I walked up and down Solano and on San Pablo photographing every blank wall. So I actually have a whole repository of potential sites. And people are always pointing out the like the Supercut building, and a catty corner from that, where the Gathering Tribes is. Those are 2 visible walls, and we've had actually discussions with both business owners, and it's not easy for the businesses. And if it's a tenant, they don't own the building, and if it's a building owner, they're concerned about insurance and what it's going to do to the value of the building. So part of the issue, I think, is education and encouragement. Our feeling is if we can get just 1 or 2 places in a very visible way and show that everyone really likes it, that it would really just set everything on fire. And I mean, it's not going to happen overnight, but
Would it be possible to apply some of the public art program money, the $62,000 that you said, to something like murals, or?
well, if it was a city-owned location, then I don't think that would be a problem. If it was enhancing a private property, then I think it would be more difficult. The Arts Committee would always be available to the building owner and to the artist to act as kind of a liaison, to even to help with the city or to help the two sides. But as far as money goes, I'm not sure that we could do anything except on city-owned property. And that would even rule out doing things on like Board of Education property, unless in some way it was a joint project that we could work, into the terms of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
So, and then in Richmond, they have a Richmond sign. I think it's on a freeway overpass, and I don't know if we thought about BART or something like that, but it might be kind of interesting to have a
Well, yeah, I mean,
city logo.
the BART overpass, they're just gigantic blank canvases waiting for something, and I'm not sure any of us would exactly know how to approach BART on that.
That's interesting.
It'd be preferable to graffiti, I imagine, in their eyes.
Well, it could be pretty nice.
Yeah, yeah. We have had that, and, you mentioned the gateway seems to be something that comes up in our discussion a lot, that once the whole business at Buchanan Marin is worked out, then the idea would be to have some sort of large installation there that would signal that you are now in Albany. Yeah, that's actually in the master plan, yeah.
Okay,
If
thank
there's
you
nothing
very
else-
much.
All right, thank you.
Next, we have Chair Robert Lieber from the Social.
Just a moment. Would you like? Yeah, I'd like to actually speak to this issue. Okay.
Mayor, members of the council, nice to be here tonight. I love public art. It's something that I like to see in every city. I'd like to remind the council that the last time we had $40,000, we got 3 nice projects. We got the Rose sculpture, which is at the gateway of our city. We got a mural of tile at Terrace Park, and we also got a earth piece that's been a little controversial in our other park. But that was for $40,000, and what we did was the Arts Committee encouraged a public-private working together. So some of it was donated work rather than just commissioning a work, which is probably the most expensive way to go about these projects. So I encourage that the Arts Committee and the council continue to look for opportunities to have public-private relationships with the money that they have and the money that they're going to get in the future, and look to finding some projects that possibly they can do that way. I would be interested to know what the restrictions actually are on helping with a piece of art on a public building or a private building. It seems that we probably could get some of those projects done if it was okay to spend some of that money on a building that we didn't own. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing more in our town.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on the arts? Okay, we'll move on with staff presentation, please. Oh.
This is all for entrance now. I'm Robert Lieber, I'm chair of the Economic and Social Justice Commission, and I'm here to share our work plan and some of our accomplishments from last year. Not on this list, but at the very beginning of the year, we kind of reviewed some projects that the council had been interested in years past, such as single payer, and we decided that we needed to wait and let the Affordable Health Care Act see how that played out in California before bringing that back to you or asking you to support that again or not. We also looked at the Department of Peace, which we had supported several times in the past at the council, and right now that's kind of in limbo, so we also didn't go along with that this year and doing extra work. At the beginning of the year, I saw a lot of gun violence in America, and the Social and Economic Justice Commission took up the issues of guns and found there were a lot of divergent views throughout of our city, and we didn't take a position at that time, although I would say that the most interesting proposal we got from a citizen was that Albany have a ordinance that banned all firearms in the city. Of course, the police chief said that he wouldn't enforce such an ordinance, but it was very interesting that somebody came all the way and presented that as something that they thought we should do. We also had some violent crime in our city, not much. We're lucky that way. But we felt it was appropriate for the city to have a mechanism for reaching out to the victims of crimes. And we assured ourselves that the police department actually does do some of that, and there's organizations both in the community and the county that are doing those kind of things with individual people who were the victims of crime. We were active in the homeless issues that are going on in Albany now. They also now have become entangled with the homelessness that's going on in the board. During the year, all of our members visited the temporary shelter which you placed down near the bulb. We found the shelter to be a humane shelter, adequate shelter. We did send on to you a few suggestions, one being that there might be some privacy issues that you could take care of and make better at those shelters simply by having some partitions. Another was that it would be nice if we could figure out a way to have the facilities for showers and bathrooms opened up in a little longer to a little more people during the day, just as something for to do, if it was possible. So that was pretty much last year. And, we only meet every other month, so, it's far and few between. So we try to do stuff on our own in between. So we'd like to continue this year to monitor the Eastshore State Park and the bulb and the transition of that piece of property to the state park. And we're just monitoring that, and as we see the decisions that you make, to hopefully give some suggestions that may help along the way. Affordable housing has been a big issue, and we reviewed the housing element within the general plan that's coming forth. And also in the community, we know that there is at least one group that is very concerned with housing and reviewing those plans too. But also, we've talked several times about what affordable housing means in Albany, and we want to continue to do that. One of the issues that we'd like to explore that we'd like to get some feedback from you on is more than 50% of the people in Albany are renters, and there is no rent stabilization in Albany, either as a formal kind or informal kind. So we wanted to explore those issues, see what our city's doing, see what other cities in the Bay Area are doing, seeing what's effective, and hopefully getting you a report about that so you can make your mind up. We also would like to look at the basic social services that are all offered in Albany. Right now, we actually are offering more social services than normal as we do the transition to the park at the bulb. And I think the commission would like to look at the feasibility of having something, no matter how small, that the city maintains on a permanent basis. Because we're always reacting to these issues, and it might be better, we're thinking, for the city to be in a position where we offer at least some minimums, and we want to explore what those minimums might be in reality, and if they are a possibility at all, considering the resources of our city. We've looked at living wages before, and the city did pass a living wage ordinance, but it has only to do with city workers. We are considering talking about that again, as it is a subject that's on the minds of the American people right now. And we'd like your feedback on that also. And that's kind of what we have planned for this year. And I actually, although it's only a few things, the park issues, affordable housing, and wages, I think they're important issues that whether we make decisions or not on it, or whether you make decisions or not on them, it's good to keep them in your mind.
Thank you. Are there questions, comments? Just a reminder that we like pros and cons on some of those issues that you want to bring forward.
Yes.
Okay?
And maybe I would have a quick comment here. On the rent, the idea of some kind of rent review program, it seems like the first thing we would need to do is find out what are the rents in Albany, and are they going up, faster than people can afford? So, gathering that kind of information, I think would be step one. And,
I think that's correct.
yeah, and then we take it from there as to what we might or might not be able to do about it.
Right. We've also seen several programs that we're going to explore. One was in San Leandro, which is a non-binding rent board that basically gets renters and landlords together to help them arbitrate their issues, and they aren't, they don't have the force of law, but they do have the ability to get them together at least to talk.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Is there anyone in the audience who has a question for the committee? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Last but not least, we have Max Way, Chair of the Sustainability Committee.
So good evening, and thank you for having us here today. I'm joined by my vice chair, Charlie Britt Blanchard. So thank you, Charlie. So first off, I'd just like to acknowledge the outstanding support that we've received from the city staff over the past few years that I've been on the committee, from Jeff Bond and Claire Griffin. I think they do really a yeoman's job every week or every month that we meet, and we really are so appreciative of their efforts to support our work. And the second prefatory comment that I'd like to make is that we on the committee would really like to have a greater degree of engagement with council, if possible. And so we'd like, hopefully, to start what can be an ongoing dialogue and not just an annual update, wherever possible. So we're hoping to bring more extended presentation to council next month at a council meeting in March. Okay, with that, I'd like to just review some of our key accomplishments. Can I borrow that, Charlie? Absolutely. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Okay, so with that, I'd like to just review some of our key accomplishments from last year and look forward to this year to map out what some of our key priorities are within the committee. So the first thing, of course, is that we are co-organizers of the Arts and Green Festival, which is, I think it's typically on a Saturday in May. I think the date moves around, but that's been going on pretty strongly. And a priority there is we'd like to involve the community a little bit more in the future. So, for example, maybe some arts and crafts put together by middle schoolers, for example. We also have some commitments within the arts community in Albany, the Albany Arts Gallery, for example. The committee continues to review community development projects, and so this is where Jeff is extremely helpful, both Jeff and Claire. So we've been reviewing the UC Mixed Use Development Project. We've been reviewing that primarily on the measures that affect sustainability, energy usage, for example, the amount of solar PV that is being proposed, and sometimes we push back to try to be more aggressive within reason. We've also spent a lot of time within the committee reviewing CCA options, which are community choice aggregation, namely really evaluating the Marin Clean Energy community choice aggregation program. And we've made a recommendation, as you know, to pursue follow-up analysis to do increased due diligence on joining the MCE. And we can talk about that more if there's interest, but I'll just mention that here. Another major activity for the committee that both Charlie and I are very involved in are updating the greenhouse gas inventory update. And we do have a slide, which is being projected here. Thank you, Charlie. So I'm not sure if the council has this before them or it's hard to see, but this is basically a really fascinating slide which provides a snapshot of past emissions, 2004 through 2012, and projected emissions to 2020. And it provides a glimpse of where we've been, where we're going, and it breaks out the emissions by the main sectors, electricity, gas, which is basically water heating and space heating, transportation, and waste and water. Water, that's a smaller portion. But it's a very encouraging look, I think. So one of the things we wanted to do is just hopefully provide some grounds for optimism. So one of the things to note is that we, of course, all benefit from state regulations which improve our electricity supply, cleanliness, or the carbon intensity of our electricity supply, as well as our fuel supply for transportation fuel. So we've benefited from that. So from 2004 to 2012, we've achieved approximately a 15% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions toward our 25% reduction for 2020. So if we project forward to 2020 with flat demand, so no increase in energy demand, then we are basically, we believe that we're on track to meeting our 25% goal, potentially to exceed that. But there's really no room for additional growth. So for example, adding additional developments at UC Village, for example, or on Solano could potentially push us higher. I'd love to spend more time on this, but just in the interest of time, we'll move forward and we can potentially dig a lot more deeply into this particular chart. There's a lot of information, a lot of really interesting findings within it. But just for the interest of time, we'll move forward here. Okay, we're also encouraging the adoption of tightening the city's green building requirements. So these are for commercial and multifamily units, for example. We're encouraging greater school energy efficiency through a school subcommittee. So we're just trying to build a tighter relationship and have a greater influence within the schools. We've established an education and outreach subcommittee, so we'll discuss this more next month to council, hopefully. And we've one of the activities of that committee has to prepare a community outreach proposal. Okay, so for policy review and initiatives, we will be providing a capital implementation plan for council review and direction in the next month, I believe. Corresponding to that, we are also preparing recommendations for climate action plan funding. So if you'll recall, a few years ago, maybe a year ago, there was a utility users tax proposal. So we'd like to look at that and other options for funding the climate action plan in the future. We'll be providing feedback on the general plan update. We're supporting the preparation of the CCA feasibility study that I mentioned. As part of our ongoing review of community development, we'll be reviewing building features of St. Mary's College High School, as well as the UC mixed-use development. The Arts and Greens Festival will continue strongly, we believe. The Sustainability Committee is partnering with the Traffic and Safety Committee and the Planning and Zoning Committee to continue parking policy discussion, specifically Measure D, to look at hopefully creative and constructive approaches to revising that measure. There's continued policy discussions related to leaf blowers, which are a very high source of particulate matter and blowing around a lot of particulates, which are harmful to health, particularly to younger, like infants and younger people. There's going to be continued discussion led by Charlie for school energy efficiency and building material reviews. And we will continue to make an effort to facilitate community outreach. So hopefully with these accomplishments and planned initiatives, the council has a sense that a lot of the work we do is in support of the strategic policy initiatives that the city has put forth. And so those are really underscored here in the next set of bullets. So specifically, we really think that our 2014 priority projects will help implement or support the objective of promoting a vital and inviting business area by reviewing planned commercial use developments such as the UC mixed use process. We've also been supportive of complete streets, which is another key objective for the city. Secondly, by definition, really, we're in support of the city's, the climate action plan, and so that's under the objective of fostering community climate action. Okay, so within the community and building more awareness and hopefully more empowering people to take more actions and through education and outreach. And so that just ties into the last objective, which is engagement of our diverse community, both through outreach and also by providing feedback on the general plan. So in a nutshell, that's what we had to offer. It's a lot, I know. Thanks again for having us, and look forward to having more interaction with you in the future.
Are there questions or comments from the
No, it
council?
looks like you have a lot on your plate. Thank you for.
Again, when you bring items to us,
busy.
we like a pro-con analysis, so we would appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you very much. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to ask a question or comment? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Go to the city public forum announcements. For person desiring to address the city council on an item that's not on the agenda, please note that city policy limits each speaker up to 3 minutes. The mayor may reduce the time limit per speaker depending on the number of speakers. The Brown Act limits the council's ability to take and/or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, such items are normally referred to staff for comment or to a future agenda. All persons wishing to speak on an item on the agenda are to fill out speaker cards and to provide to the clerk. Comments related to items appearing on the agenda are taken up at the time the city council deliberates each action item. The mayor will announce when the period for public comment is open on each agenda item. And there are speaker cards in the back.
Is there anyone who would like to address the council on matters not on the agenda? Oh, that's all right. Come on, come on.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council and City staff. My name is Jack Kinney. I'm the new chair of the Community Media Access Committee. I wish I could say that. I'm not here to make a report, obviously. You'll get that report from us in the near future. But I did want to tell you one of the things that I know many of you are familiar with is one of the things we do for community is a community event that has media, the Albany Film Fest. And the fourth one is coming up. This is your last meeting, I think, before it's going to take place. So I want to make sure you all knew about it. Hopefully you've gotten your invitations and you're going to be able to attend. The film festival itself is Saturday, March 1st at the Community Center. And we've had films submitted from all over the country, about 80 films submitted. And of those, we're going to show about 30. And so it's going to be a great event. I want to thank the council for your support of this event in the past and city staff for all you've done, especially Jeremy Allen and Near Mouse have been great. There's also a gala event the night before that's at the community center also, and that's to make sure we thank our sponsors who have helped us put this on, all the filmmakers, the judges, everyone connected with it, and of course city officials. So I hope you can attend that. I just wanted to point out that there's a couple new things happening this year with the festival. We have participation from Pixar Animation Studios. We have 2 local Albany residents who are Pixar employees who are going to do presentations about how animated films are made. And that'll be in the early part when we direct it more at the youth audience. And I think it's going to be a great presentation for people to see. The other thing is we have partnered with the Solano Avenue Association to promote the festival. So you may be seeing movie trivia posters with our poster up and down Solano Avenue, and people can win prizes if they answer the questions correctly. So it's good for the businesses too along Solano. So just in finishing, I just wanted to say that we're trying to encourage more Albany involvement and people to see the films as well as make the films. And two of the judges this year, we always get people who are in the film industry to be our judges. And two of the judges are Albany High graduates who have gone on to have careers in the film business, Waylon Bacon and Ari Siegel. So I think it's developing as an event, and I hope everyone can attend.
Thank you, and you make a great master of ceremonies.
Thank you.
Can you leave a couple of those flyers for us, or is it possible?
I have some small postcards
great.
with all the information. I can
Okay,
get that.
thank you.
Hi, Mayor and Council. Amber Whitson, Albany resident. Last night, I was denied entry to the Albany Temporary Shelter by a rather curt and snarky Operation Dignity employee. The denial of my admission was based on the fact that my name wasn't on the list of Bulb residents. On December 4th, 2013, 3 Albany police officers came to where I live on the Albany Bulb and assured me that there was no more list, and that all barriers to people using the shelter had been removed. Upon seeing that my name was not on the list, the Operation Dignity employee told me that I would need to go to Berkeley Food and Housing Project in Berkeley to get them to verify that I was eligible to use the shelter. For a time there, I was hearing that people had the option of proving their eligibility the day after they had stayed in the shelter. I was told that I could not stay there until after I proved my eligibility. My interaction with the shelter staff last night and the stories that I have heard from the new Bulb residents that I have met over the past few months make it apparent to me that Albany's temporary shelter, coupled with the very rude Operation Dignity employees that staff the shelter, are actually creating more Bulb residents by unnecessarily banning clients from the shelter who then move out to the Bulb than they are bothering to help. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on a matter not on the agenda? I have 2 items. One, we would like to congratulate and thank Officer Christensen for his 32 years of service to the city of Albany. He's retiring, and we're very appreciative of the work he's done. And then a sad commentary. Officer Steve Foss, who was a 1981 graduate of Albany High School, died last week of cancer. And the service for him, unfortunately, is the same day as the Film Fest. It's March 1, 11 a.m., Higgins Mortuary in Antioch. So Steve was also a very, very good example of our police force. I always felt very comfortable in the mornings when it was dark and I was walking my dog before work because he would always come up and down our street. And we live in the hinterland, as some of you know. And we will adjourn the meeting in his honor. Memory. Next item, please.
Public hearing, ordinance number 2014-03, amendments to the Planning and Zoning chapter of the Municipal Code to allow digital billboards in the commercial mixed-use zoning district. Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation. that the council introduce for first reading ordinance number 2014-03, amendments to the planning and zoning chapter of the municipal code to allow digital billboards in the commercial mixed-use zoning district.
Staff, please.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. The item before you this evening is the first reading of an ordinance that would came about initially as an idea to help finance the development of a public works service center. The council back in October, in an action related to the service center, authorized staff to begin to work on this agenda item. The idea would be to amend the zoning ordinance to allow digital billboards in the CMX district. Penelope, if you could hit the screen to staff. This is a brief summary. The idea would be to allow digital billboards, which presently under our zoning ordinance are not allowed anywhere in the city, but to allow them in under certain conditions, the first of which is a relocation agreement. Presently, the city has 2 billboards. They're operated by Clear Channel. They're located on top of the Montero's building. I have a couple of photographs of the billboards as they are today, or recently. This is a Google Earth photo. Under the government code, cities can enter into agreements with the carrier, or not the carriers, the companies that sell the advertising, in this case Clear Channel, where they will remove these existing static old-fashioned billboards and in exchange for placing a new digital billboard. So one of the provisions would be to allow a digital billboard only in those circumstances when we're taking out another billboard. Whatever would be proposed would go through the Planning and Zoning Commission review. In this case, it would be in the CMX district, our commercial mixed-use district, which is along the freeways. If a digital billboard was installed, it would be oriented away from the view of residential areas, and in particular, this is an aerial photograph from 555 Pierce, showing roughly the area where a digital billboard might go, and in this case, it would be oriented towards Interstate 580. My understanding is that Interstate 80 is in some sort of a scenic highway designation where a digital billboard is not allowed, at least in the Albany section of Interstate 80. So whatever would go on, be installed in Albany would be oriented towards Interstate 580. Back to the list of key features. A couple of other things. First of all, the brightness levels would adjust. One of the most frequent comments that we've received about this from members of the public are that some of the early digital billboards were very bright. Particularly, there were some by the Bay Bridge where it seemed like driving late at night when it was dark, it would really blare it out. The newer models adjust, so they're brighter at dusk or at dawn, but as it darkens, the brightness level adjusts downward as well, so it's not as much of a distraction to the driver. In terms of other types of distractions, there are both federal and state regulations that Caltrans and the Federal Highway Administration has to make sure that the digital billboard isn't a distraction to the driver. And then finally, the Planning and Zoning Commission, who had several meetings, discussed this item at several of their meetings, proposed that the provisions include requiring photovoltaic power to power the unit, if feasible, and as photovoltaics get more efficient and as the LED screens become more efficient as well, it may get to the point where the PV power can get close to generating enough electricity to power these on their own. If there is some electricity to be used from off the grid, from the grid, then the ordinance calls for the installation to use the green power alternative that is offered by utilities such as PG&E. So with this proposed amendment, this would be your first reading. If you have any comments, we can incorporate those in, and and then it comes back for a second reading. Usually that's on your consent calendar unless there are major changes to the ordinance. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Yeah, just to reaffirm that there are currently only 2 billboards in Albany, so, and not likely to be any new billboards built elsewhere, except for this digital billboard in the CMX.
So as a practical matter, this allows one installation, and it has to be by Clear Channel.
Right. So the existing billboards would no longer have been permitted under current? Okay. My only other comment is that I'm wondering if it's worth contemplating, PV power is great, down in the CMX zone. It can be pretty windy at times. I don't know if that is an alternative energy source. It would be practical or not, but it seems like it would serve sort of the same function in terms of being a green power source and making a statement, more or less.
Right, it's both making a statement, in this case, it could be economically feasible as well, that as the price of PV panels goes down, it might pencil out for the operator. Mm-hmm. That would be our hope.
So I don't know if I'd want to put something on 880, but it is interesting that Berkeley has one just before us, and then Richmond has one right after us. So it's just a little odd.
Yeah, I haven't researched everything that's going on with these regulations. Are very complex, and how Berkeley put the CBS outdoor that installed one. I suspect it has something to do with the fact that the one that's over south of Gilman is actually across the street, across the Eastshore Highway. So it's not right next to the freeway, and that may have something to do with how they were able to get it installed there. But again, our understanding is that won't be possible in our case. Right.
Now, I'm a little unclear on the concept. Once this billboard is in place, are the 2 billboards on Montero's going to go away?
Yes.
They will go away?
There would be an agreement that would require them to go away.
Okay. As far as the issue of wind power, you can have your power supply and your power uses separated, so we could, if it was feasible at all to have turbines down in the CMX district, that's something that could be explored. I suspect it's a complex issue.
Right. The PV panel is pretty straightforward. But we can certainly look into the feasibility of having a wind turbine of some sort in the facility, either powering this billboard or for the Public Works Service Center, for that matter.
You're going to refer that to sustainability.
Right. Did it come up at some point, or did staff ever find out how much energy is actually used by these things, or is it a huge amount, or?
There was some research, and I'm not remembering the numbers off the top of my head, but there was some discussion about that at the Planning and Zoning Commission. Sorry, I don't know.
Would it be superfluous to have a statement that says very explicitly, there shall be a maximum of 2 digital billboards allowed?
That would be, we could modify the ordinance to make that very clear, sure. Just to clarify, if I may, Madam Mayor, just to make sure that by saying 2, you mean one facing one direction, the other facing the other direction? Or are you saying 2 different installations, say another property owner?
No, yeah. Well, what you said in your discussion is that there are 2 owned by Clear Channel. So now with this one, this was going to have 2, will this billboard be actually 2 billboards? Because it'll face in 2 different directions?
That would be the way
that's how you would interpret it?
Yeah.
So then basically we could actually just say there will be a maximum of 1, right? Yes, 1.
One installation, 2 screens.
Yeah. That's what it sounds like.
Okay, so there shall be a maximum of 1 digital billboard allowed.
One with 2 screens.
Okay.
Yeah.
1 digital billboard with 2 screens.
Now I'm really confused. I thought you just told us we couldn't have a screen facing Highway 80. That would be the case. Can we see the picture again of the? So if this, by the way, that building in the middle there is now gone, right?
That's right.
Where, so if there's a billboard there and it's two-sided, one of them will be facing Highway 80, which we can't do. I thought that's just what I heard.
No, one of them would be facing, would be visible to, I guess it's
Northbound and
southbound
southbound.
travelers, and the other one would be visible to the northbound travelers.
So it'd be on a triangle.
Exactly.
Okay. It's going to look a little dicey if we pass an ordinance that says there's only one billboard, electronic billboard allowed in Albany. And oh, by the way, it's on the city's property. I think that would be perceived of as being objectionable by some folks would say, how come you guys get to hog the only billboard allowed in town?
Well, we're not limiting it to this particular piece of property. We're limiting it to this zoning district. So theoretically, if the city didn't go forward with an installation on this property, a neighboring property owner would have the same rights.
Of course, we are going to go ahead and do this, right?
We'll bring something back to you at some point for your consideration of that, yes.
Well,
I don't know. I guess I have mixed feelings about that.
Yeah, I wondered about one of the last requirements is that it be designed to be incorporated into the architectural style of the adjacent structure. How are we translating that out for didn't we put out a request for proposals on the maintenance building? And as I recall, it wasn't even in the little site map that, so, I mean, that has to be considered, I presume.
We would want to, this was a provision that the Planning and Zoning Commission added. They just didn't want to, they want to make sure that the building architect is in the loop of the design and placement of the sign with the people who would actually be installing the sign. So just to make sure that if there's a color scheme or something of that nature, or if there's a particular style of building material that's used, that the sign complement that or be consistent with it. So, let's say theoretically it's kind of a Target-like thing with some corrugated metal or something like that.
Right.
Try to use some of those same themes in the design of it.
I mean, I would fully support that, obviously, but,
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there any other questions from council?
I would just like to say, in giving credit where credit is due, the first time I ever recall this issue coming up was during the campaign when Councilmember Peter Moss suggested the idea of such a billboard, and when Beth Pollard was mentioning the idea of this new maintenance center, I said, Pete has this idea for a digital billboard, and this light bulb went off over her head, and here we are.
I'm not sure I'm the first person to ever mention that, but I had brought that up at one point.
Well, we ready?
A question?
No? Oh, you have to.
Yeah. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this issue?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Peggy McQuaid, Albany resident. Several years ago with the Art and Green Festival, we explored using one of the Clear Channel billboards, actually Tom Cooper, to give credit, explored using one of the Clear Channel billboards on Solano, and they had space to give to nonprofits as long as they hadn't rented it out, so it never really worked for us, but had there been a blank time, for lack of a better term, we probably could have advertised the Art and Green Festival on their billboard. And the point of all this is, since a digital billboard, I assume, has moving screens with different things on them, perhaps somewhere in here we could get some language to encourage the use by nonprofit or even city organizations to advertise functions in some manner. You'd need to massage the language more than a bit, but that might be something that would also work here. Thank you.
Thank you. Other people who wish to speak to this?
In looking at the ordinance when it was up there, proposed ordinance, I was confused about the requirement that it faced away from residential. If that's 180 degrees away, then there's only one side possible. If it's 90 degrees away, I think it would be plainly visible to residential. And then just one overarching comment. I can't believe we're really talking about it. These things are garish. They're awful. It's not Albany. But I think that's very vague, the facing away from residential requirement.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this issue?
Evening, Mayor Thompson, members of the council. My name is Robert Hatton. I'm with Clear Channel Outdoor. I just thought I would address the council and address a couple of items that have come up earlier. First, I would like to note that in our agreements with other cities, it is very, very frequent for us to insert the provision such that where we have available space, unsold space that is, it's dedicated to public use, and that can be at the discretion of the city manager or whomever the city makes that determination. And other cities where we have these agreements are using them to great impact in their communities to promote arts festivals, parks department items, public safety, etc. And so this can be a real resource for the city. Typically our occupancy rates in a given month average about 75 to 80%, which would leave nearly 1/4 of the space on the sign available for use by the public. The next thing I'd like to address is the sustainability discussion, and I'd like to emphasize that Clear Channel would be happy to participate in whatever way is feasible with making this sign adhere to the standards that the city has set forth. That can take many different forms, and I think it's important that the city is flexible in whatever way that may be, whether it be on-site photovoltaics, off-site wind, carbon credits, something like that. We're willing to explore all alternatives. And then lastly, to the mechanics of this and how it would work in practice, we would set the sign on somewhat of a V so that the angles, the panels are facing Interstate 580, are facing kind of away from the residences behind in the city of Albany. And the first thing I look forward to doing is working with the architectural firm so that we can incorporate that design as well as incorporate the aesthetic elements into the design of the maintenance facility. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa Kleinbub, Albany resident. I live on Pierce Street, so I probably could see this from the windows of my building. I think it would have actually been helpful here to actually show what the triangle sign looks like as part of what you're looking at there, because to think about it not being visible from residences, I'm not so sure about that, but maybe it's possible. I'm also not sure that much of the benefits of a sign like this on 580 to advertise our community events, because I'm not sure how much traffic we have in our community on that road.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this? Seeing no one, we'll bring it back to council.
I have one more question. So if you didn't have the signs on the Montero's building, or Clear Channel gave those up, would there still be the billboards up there so that the community could put some things up there, or would you just do away with them as because it's an eyesore?
The signs on Montero's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, without
Basically
any
nicer.
changes to the ordinance, those signs presumably will stay in place.
Oh, so, but Clear Channel would still own them, or would we
Yes.
own?
But if with the changes in the ordinance, we can then negotiate an agreement with Clear Channel for an installation on Cleveland.
And get rid of this.
And then those signs would be, we'd figure out the timing of it such that the signs on Montero's go away when this is installed.
Okay. So we don't really want the signs on Montero's anymore, even if it's for community billboards.
Well, I wouldn't expect them to do a community event all the time. Those signs need to, it's a manual labor to take the messages on and off. They use a vinyl paper.
It's complicated.
It's a little bit more complicated. I'd presume that they would continue to use it. They're not in good shape. They're sometimes they deteriorate. The paper peels off and so forth. But I think we should assume that they'll stay without any, if we don't have this approval.
Yeah, I would comment, if this is a V shape to get maximum exposure on 580, there'll also be a building between it and the residential area. So if this thing doesn't go 200 feet up in the air, quite a bit of it's going to be blocked by the new maintenance center, I would presume.
It won't. Well, first of all, the actual sign will go through the normal planning process, and so that we'll take an image like this and be able to do a good visual simulation from all sorts of different angles, and we can talk through the details of that. I would expect that an installation would be above the roof of the maintenance center. So it would be visible from the high rises, but it would be the display part of the sign would be oriented towards the freeway, and the back, which would be primarily visible from this kind of an image, would be painted dark gray or black or something like that, so that it wouldn't stand out in any particular way. Basically trying to get it to blend in as much as possible into the urban industrial area there.
Right.
I move that we introduce for first reading ordinance number 2014-03, amendments to the Planning and Zoning chapter of the Municipal Code to allow digital billboards in the commercial mixed-use zoning district.
I'll second.
And are you going to include the statement, there shall be a maximum of one digital billboard with 2 screens?
Yes, with the understanding that there be one billboard with 2 screens.
Maximum. It has been moved by Vice Mayor Weil, seconded by Councilmember Atkinson, that we introduce for first reading ordinance number 2014-03, ordinance of the Albany City Council amending Chapter 20, the Planning and Zoning chapter of the Municipal Code to allow digital billboards in the commercial mixed-use zoning district. Is there further discussion? And we'll waive the reading. Okay, would you please poll the council?
Councilmember Atkinson?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Councilmember Moss?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Weil?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Abstain, and the motion carries. Next item, please.
Status report from Measure D Working Group regarding placing a measure on the ballot to amend residential parking standards. Staff recommendation that council receive the update and provide direction, if any, regarding next steps.
You again. In November of 2013, the City Council authorized the establishment of a working group formed by members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Traffic and Safety Commission, and the Sustainability Committee. The task assigned to the working group was to evaluate the pros and cons of placing a measure on the ballot to amend the residential parking standards portion of Measure D, which was a measure approved by the voters in 1978. The working group has held 2 meetings and has a 3rd meeting scheduled for this Thursday here in the council chambers. The initial meeting in December was primarily to discuss and introduce the topic and the goals for the group and some background research. There are a number of regional agencies and universities that have done research on parking policies. That research was provided for the working group. A second meeting in January, this was January 30th, began to focus in a little bit on the potential spectrum of changes that might be explored in Measure D. I think to kind of summarize the second discussion, I think there began to be an awareness that perhaps a one-size-fit-all type of amendment may not be appropriate. And so what the working group set staff the task of preparing a matrix to identify the range of potential changes to the residential parking standards with pros and cons for each one of those. We have drafted that, and that will be the topic of discussion at the next working group. We also, at the January 30th meeting, provided a briefing on the process to amend the residential parking standards. There are initiative processes that can be sponsored by voters, and then there are processes that are sponsored by the City Council. One of the important distinctions between those two is that a voter-sponsored measure does not require CEQA review, but it also limits the role that city staff can have in the crafting of the measure. A City Council-sponsored initiative may require some CEQA review. This is an area of the law that's evolving quite a bit. Right now, in 2014, we have a new provision under CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, that exempts certain kinds of residential projects in transit priority areas from a parking impact review. And so it's conceivable that a measure can be fine-tuned, that the City Council could put something on the ballot that if it applies to only in transit priority areas, then an environmental review would not be required. If an environmental review is required, that's fine. It just takes a little bit longer, and it's probably not practical to get it on the ballot in 2014. It could go on the following city election, which would be 2016. The environmental review, if we decided we needed to do that, could be folded into the work that we're doing with the general plan. So it's going to boil down to scope of the changes to the residential parking standards and the timing of when it could possibly get on the ballot. As I mentioned, our next meeting is this Thursday, and there are a series of meetings that have been mapped out beyond that with a target to get back to you with a comprehensive pros and cons, a matrix of policy alternatives for your consideration in May, and then that gives you a couple of months to consider that and give us direction so that you can make a decision in July whether you want to put something on the ballot or not. July being is kind of the practical matter, the deadline that you face before you're going on your August recess in order to for us to get something to the county clerk. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions from council?
Yeah, I have one. I'm still a little confused about whether or not this is going to go through a CEQA process if council puts it on. But I thought I heard you just say that if it's restricted to transit corridors, that we may not have to do it. But if we're talking about Measure D applies to all of Albany, and we're not all on transit corridors. So does by logically thinking, does that mean that if we take Measure D for all parking requirements for all housing or in Albany, we're going to have to go through a CEQA process? And maybe Greg would.
The City Council decision to place a measure on the ballot is a discretionary decision, so it has to be evaluated as to whether CEQA applies. So it's either, there are kind of three boxes it can fit in. It's either exempt, it's subject to a negative declaration, or there's a full EIR, and it really depends on what the proposal is. But it does have to be evaluated. Just whatever the specific proposal is that's being placed on the ballot has to be evaluated for CEQA compliance.
Okay.
So that's to be distinguished from a voter initiative, which is exempt from CEQA altogether.
Okay.
So to follow up on that, if I may, there are certain, under the new provisions of the law, there are certain types of projects in the transit priority areas that are, the changes would be exempt from CEQA, and so we could do this categorical exemption. So instead of completely eliminating the residential parking standards, you might fine-tune kind of more surgical change to limit it to the transit priority areas of the city.
So conceivably, if we're part of the reason we might be doing this is to encourage more housing, infill housing along those transit corridors, then we could do it for that, but then we'd have to keep the 2-car requirement for the rest of Albany.
This is a work in progress, so but I would, if I were to kind of preview the conclusion, I think there would be a 100% change in city parking policy for all residential development would probably, I think we would probably need to do some sort of environmental review on that.
Okay.
So if this is a citizens' initiative, the citizens don't need our permission to put this on the ballot. They need to collect 1,000 or so signatures, correct?
Right.
So I'm a little confused. I mean, we have to decide, it seems to me, at some point, which way we're going to go, because we don't, I'm concerned that if the staff participates too much in this process, that it forces our hand into making this a city initiative, which makes it more cumbersome. And I'm sure you're being very helpful to the citizens, but I need to know from you, if you could explain just how much you're allowed to be involved and when. Presumably it would be soon. If this is going to be a citizens initiative, they have to go out and start collecting signatures.
There would have to be, the measure would have to be drafted. I don't think we would participate at all in the drafting of the measure. And yeah, I believe at that point, when someone starts to work on something like that, that's outside the scope of what city staff can participate in.
So going forward, what's your sense of what you can participate in, assuming we go the citizens initiative route and we're...
I think I'd like to consult with the city attorney a little bit on that before, we haven't gotten that far into it. I think by the May report, you'll have an opportunity to give us some direction. Our work will have been completed at that point, and if a citizens initiative, if a group of citizens want to get together and pick it up in May and start to run with it, that's their prerogative. Of course, the council wants to direct us to pick one of the options and put it on yourselves, then that also is another alternative. But I suppose you could just kind of let the work stand on its own in May and see if somebody picks up the momentum from there.
And if it doesn't, then it'll be on the ballot in 2016 under our auspices, if we choose to go that direction.
We would need to get that direction from you as well in order to do the proper environmental review.
Right, which we could fold into the general plan process you just mentioned. So it's a matter of, well, I'll let it go at that. Thanks.
Any other questions from the council? Is there anyone who would like to speak to this from the audience? Seeing no one, we'll bring it back to council. What would be the pleasure of the council? Seems to me that you have planned to do the analysis. So I think that what we would be looking for would be the outcome of that meeting, and I think that would be helpful. I think that's pretty much where we...
Yeah, and we're working very hard to get it back to you so you have time to make that decision, and the scope of alternatives are available to you for 2014 or 2016. Just one other thing I would note, for if it is a citizens initiative, it is a little bit more work for the city clerk in terms of analyzing the signatures, and there's quite a bit of work actually for the city clerk's office in a citizens initiative, where it's a council initiative. It's a little bit.
What's more work, analyzing the signatures or a CEQA review?
It's
just who the work's for.
So we don't really need a motion since this is coming back?
No,
I do have one question. Under the sustainability, it says by requiring less parking, the city could reduce the cost of, and I think there's a word missing, and I was not quite sure what's.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, something got kind of garbled. It would reduce the cost of building housing.
Of building housing. Okay.
Basically, today you have to build a parking lot for two cars for each unit, or build structured parking, and that's very expensive space for housing a vehicle that in a lot of cases people don't use.
Okay, great.
If I may, just before we go, just let me give you a hypothetical. I believe the city of Piedmont has met its low-income housing requirement, but with secondary units, right? Converted garages and studios and whatnot. But we could not do that now, currently. It would be difficult under Measure D because each of those units would require 2 parking spaces. Is that correct?
It's not quite that high of a bar, but yes, it needs a total, for most homes in Albany, older homes, you need to have a total of 2 parking spaces. One that's accessible to the primary home and one that's separately accessible to the second.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit more complicated than that, but basically.
Well, I think it's more complicated because I'm not sure how many of these sort of in-law units are legal currently under. I mean, you walk around town, you go, someone's living in that studio. Just saying, you know.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we could do to, say, we're performing Measure D or as part of the general plan process is to legitimize what is already going on, which is to legitimize, make official in-law apartments. And then is that going to cause parking mayhem if we don't fix Measure D?
Well, I think you're
This was a hypothetical.
Yeah. Hypothetically, I think there's already a lot of people who have second units that aren't legalized, and I don't know that secondary units are going to cause parking mayhem in themselves.
Right.
You probably wouldn't even notice unless you just happen to have a rash of them in a particular block or something like that.
How did Piedmont deal with this?
They have more flexible parking standards. The city council probably made some amendments to their zoning code that you're not allowed to make because the voters originally approved this measure.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, next item, please. Thank you.
CDBG grant, staff recommendation that the City Council approve resolution number 2014-14 authorizing, 1, the submission of fiscal year 14-15 Community Development Block Grant project applications to Alameda County, and 2, the city manager to enter into an agreement with Alameda County for the proposed use of fiscal year 2014-15 Community Development Block Grant funds projected to be in the amount of $80,194.
Are there any questions? Oh, sorry, staff.
Okay, good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. So CDBG is one of the longest running programs of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. The program funds activities such as affordable housing, anti-poverty programs, and infrastructure development that benefit low-income people or contribute to the elimination of blight. Funds are allocated to localities based on formulas that reflect population, measures of poverty, age, of housing stocks, and more items. So one thing to take into account is that a requirement for using CDBG funds is that it must demonstrate that the funds are serving very low or low-income people or household. Examples of past projects that the City of Albany has funded with CDBG includes support to the Meals on Wheels program for seniors, homebound seniors, funding for the Alameda County 211 program and Alameda County's Homeless Management Information System, accessible curb ramps, senior center repairs, teen center upgrade and Ocean View Park restrooms, and homeless assessment. The city's projected allocation is about $80,194. And staff is proposing to allocate the funding to the following programs. Owner-occupied housing rehab, which is managed by the county for the City of Albany. The Meals on Wheels program for $16,000. Curb ramps citywide for $14,640. And homeless outreach and engagement program for $26,000 to help pay the cost associated with the services provided by Berkeley Food and Housing Project. It's also important to note that the county staff will review the budget requests for all of the urban county, which Albany is part of, and to make sure that the expenditures in aggregate meet HUD requirements. And specifically, funding for services cannot exceed 15% for urban county. So that presents a limitation on how we can distribute the funds that we have. So that's what I have. If I'm ready for questions.
Questions from council?
Yeah, the little thing, only 15% of the total county funds can be used for services, but obviously individual cities can do a higher percentage as long as some other city is doing a smaller percentage. So do you work this out with the other cities in our group?
At this time, I think it's been pretty much been allocated based on what the cities have been doing in the past. I think one of the cities that uses a lot of the funding for services is Dublin, which is part of the urban county. And then we typically have not been using as much services, the funding for services, except for the Meals on Wheels program. But now we're trying to get a little bit more out of it to provide for the homeless outreach and engagement program. Yeah,
Okay.
but it's basically the county that looks at all the figures and makes that determination.
Other questions?
So the curb ramps are here because it helps people who are disabled? Is that?
That's correct, yes.
And we have a certain number that we have to have it finished by a certain year to have all of them done? So what point are we at? Do you know?
On the application...
We were trying to move ahead on that at one point.
I don't know if there's a quota. Jeff could answer that question, but based on the application, there's I think 119 that have been installed, and we're planning with this funding to do 2 or 3 more. But my understanding is that there's also there's going to be more done throughout the year using other funding as well.
So don't we have a deadline? Do we have to have something finished for curb ramps? I mean, in terms of, yeah.
Double check on that for you. Yeah, I'm not sure what the deadline is.
All right.
Other questions? Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this issue?
Hi, Amber Whitson, Albany resident. According to the papers that go with this agenda item, HUD has assigned Albany $80,194, which, when broken down into $47,550 for jurisdictional improvements, $16,044 for owner-occupied housing rehabilitation, $6,600 for general administration, and then $910 for that county analysis, only totals up to $71,104. The staff proposal totals up to $72,684, so I'm guessing you guys are allowed to come up below the total that you've been assigned by HUD. The thing is, the resolution says that you guys are going to contribute $10,640 to curb ramps, and the actual staff proposal says $14,640 towards curb ramps, which, when curb ramps actually cost between $800 and $1,500 each, because I've been kind of researching them for a while, that's kind of exorbitant prices you guys are going to be paying if you're going to get 2 curb ramps. And you're actually going to spend $14,640 on them, you're going to be paying $7,320 for curb ramps that cost at most $1,500. If you get 3, you're going to be paying $4,880 for curb ramps that, again, cost at most $1,500. If you're actually going to, it seems to me like before you guys could really vote on this, unless somebody wants to say it's a typo, it seems like you guys are going to have to write the resolution properly, because the resolution says you guys are going to be spending a lot less than the staff report says you guys are going to be spending. I wanted to know, and I'm sure that staff could answer this for me after the meeting. It says that there's been CDBG funds spent on a homeless assessment in the past, and as Isabella Duke just named it, as separate from the HMIS. I would like to know what this homeless assessment was that the money from CDBG was supposedly spent on, since the Homeless Task Force was not allowed to actually spend any CDBG funds, or for the city to spend any CDBG funds on the homeless needs assessment that we wanted to get done, that Berkeley Food and Housing Project seemingly failed at. It just seems to me like you guys can't really vote on this unless you actually put it clear how much you're actually spending on the curb ramps. If it's $10,640 or $14,640, this city seems to blow a lot of money in a lot of directions, and a whole lot seems to go towards curb ramps. I'm not saying that everything on curb ramps is blown money, but you don't need to be spending $7,320 for something that costs $1,500. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa Kleinbub, Albany resident. I just wanted to, I'm glad to see that some of this money is going to go towards services for people who are living with homelessness right now. I'm a little curious, though, and I think we all should be, is how we actually know that this money is going towards people moderate to very low income. I do wonder, since some of what's written there about Meals on Wheels is that basically anyone can use that free of charge. I'm curious as to how that we are certain that that meets the requirement for these to be used for low to very low income folks. And I'm also curious how the curb ramps actually are clearly meeting that requirement, and whether or not the housing owner owned housing repairs, which is only $16,000, which really doesn't get you very much, that we're certain that also meets the income requirements. Because we don't have a whole lot of people, even people with disabilities who need the curb cuts, who fall into that category, in my opinion. So I think that's something to look at over time, because we really should be using these funds for the population they're intended for. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this issue? Bring it back to council. Staff, did you have a comment about the numbers?
Oh, yeah, it's a typo in the resolution, so we'll modify that.
Is for, we're at list 10,640 for the curb ramps. It should be in the resolution what it says in the staff report, which is 14,640. So the zero just should have been a 4.
So are you going to look into how much curb ramps cost? Because it does sound like a good point that we didn't want to get our money's worth.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can talk to Public Works staff. Sure.
I move that we approve resolution number 2014-14, authorizing the submission of fiscal year 14-15 Community Development Block Grant project applications to Alameda County, and the city manager to enter into an agreement with Alameda County for the proposed use of fiscal year 2014-15 Community Development Block Grant funds projected to be in the amount of $80,000, $80,194.
Second.
Okay, is there a second?
Michael.
It has been moved by Vice Mayor Weil, seconded by Councilmember Barnes, that the City Council approve resolution number 2014-14, authorizing the submission of fiscal year 14-15 Community Development Block Grant project applications to Alameda County, and the city manager to enter into an agreement with Alameda County for the proposed use of the fiscal year 2014-15 Community Development Block Grant funds projected to be in the amount of $80,194. And that means that we are making the typographical change on line 13 and a half on the second page to $14,640. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, will you please poll the council?
Councilmember Atkinson?
Aye.
Councilmember Barnes?
Aye.
Councilmember Moss?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Weil?
Yes.
Mayor Thompson?
Aye, and the motion carries. Next item, please.
Other business, reports on meeting attended, announcement of events, future agenda items.
Is there a report by any member of the council or any information? Okay, if not, staff? No? All
Just
right,
briefly,
then we will have a moment of silence and
Madam
we
Mayor, I was just going to report that I'm attending the meeting of the League of California Cities Board of Directors in San Francisco Thursday and Friday.
Oh, okay, good, thank you. We will have a moment of silence in memory of Steve Foss, and we will then adjourn the meeting in his memory. The meeting is adjourned in memory of Steve Foss.